Hello, everyone. Welcome to our fireside chat that we're having this evening. Thank you so much for coming. I really do appreciate it. We all do here at Virginia Tech. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome everyone in our audience who's here from Virginia Tech itself. I see some of my students in the audience, Virginia Community Colleges, Prince William County Public Schools, and anyone else in the audience who I might have missed. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope this is really beneficial for you and you find it value added to be here. We're really excited to host you. This chat is hosted by the Department of Business Information Technology within the Pamplin College of Business here at Virginia Tech. It's also hosted by the BIT Cyber program in Northern Virginia and the Metro DC area. And it's also hosted by the Integrated Security Education and Research Center, or the ICERT. I would like to thank Dr. Svetlana Filatra for hosting this, and Justin Monday for helping to set this up. Their work has been instrumental in getting this together. Thank you very much. I'm Joe Simpson, and I'll be hosting this chat. We'll be exploring the careers of our esteemed panelists for this chat and leverage their expertise to getting into potential career paths within the cybersecurity industry and what skills employers really look for and value. We'll end the discussion by highlighting the programs here at Virginia Tech that you can look into. We will host this for 45 minutes of panel discussion, followed by opening the floor up based on the amount of time that we have for questions from the audience to our panelists. We will have a few housekeeping items here. Please keep your microphones off. If you have a question, type it into chat, and when we open it up for questions at the end, we will answer them then. And then overall, just be friendly and enjoy. So with that said, I'll open this free for all for our panelists. Any one of our panelists, please dive in at any time. And if you have a response, just jump right in. With that said, I'll ask the first question to get this started. Would you introduce yourselves and describe your personal journey that you had into cybersecurity and its career, the career that you've had from Virginia Tech into your career?
Nobody wants to go first.
Go ahead,
I guess I'll go. I'm Wade Baker. I'm a professor in the Business Information Technology program at Virginia Tech. I teach one of the field study courses at the undergrad level, and also in the Master of Information Technology, and sometimes in the MBA program. So I'm located in the Northern Virginia area rather than the Blacksburg campus. I've been in cybersecurity for about 20 years. I have been with Virginia Tech for 3 years, although I got my PhD from Virginia Tech as well. So I'm kind of a longtime affiliate of Virginia Tech. They can't get rid of me. I started in cybersecurity from IT, which is pretty traditional, especially 20 years ago when the field was developing as kind of its own niche. I was doing system and network administration at another university, and they said, "Who wants to go get some training in firewall management?" And I said, "I'll do it. That sounds pretty cool." And from that point on, I just really enjoyed the security specialization of IT and continued to focus. And over my career, I have had lots of different roles in security. So I've done some audits and risk assessment type positions. I have led a cyber threat intelligence team. I've been involved in incident response, have led research, and before I joined Virginia Tech, I was a chief technology officer for Verizon Security Solutions, and then VP of strategy at a startup in DC called Threat Connect. And then joined the faculty at Virginia Tech, and still stay plugged in the cybersecurity world through a research firm that I have, the Cyentia Institute, and we do basically data science oriented security research. So have thoroughly enjoyed all aspects of the career, and happy to share some perspectives that I hope were helpful to you this evening.
Great, thank you.
I'll jump in. My name is Chris Freiberg. I'm here in beautiful Ashburn, Virginia, in Northern Virginia, Loudon County. I attended Virginia Tech back in the 80s and studied civil engineering, and really enjoyed that. But from there I got into the CAD world, and that took me fully into computers and away from civil engineering. So it's CAD being computer-aided drafting and design. So I've been with a series of software vendors as both a pre-sales guy and a salesperson. So really, my background is in the software vendor community and how that relates to helping customers solve problems. I think most of the people on the panel would admit that bringing in the right vendors and working with them in a productive way is very important in any kind of cybersecurity environment. So that's my perspective. Currently, I'm working for Loudon County government, trying to attract cybersecurity companies to locate and grow in Loudon County. So that's my background.
Thank you. Michael, would you like to jump in?
I think it's a great segue because, like Chris, I actually have my undergrad from Virginia Tech in civil engineering as well, and found my bouncy path into the cybersecurity world, but not through IT or through the actual cybersecurity. So I run the finances and CFO of Hive Systems. My co-founder, Alex, is on with us today as well, and we'll talk about some of that side. But hopefully I can field some of your questions that are less technical and how you can enter the world of cybersecurity without going through the computer or IT world, as I found myself.
That's great. Alex, now you have a really non-traditional pathway into cybersecurity, and it's fantastic. I was so enthusiastic to hear from you on that. Would you like to explain that?
Yeah, so I entered Virginia Tech as an undergrad studying aerospace engineering. I am a third generation Hokie, so I didn't have a lot of choice when it came to going to any colleges or universities. And I was thrilled when I ended up down in Blacksburg, and I studied aerospace engineering for 3.5 years. And I realized one morning when I woke up that I had this dream that maybe I was playing with rocket ships or models of planes in my office. And then it really came to fruition. It was a lot of math and equations. And I really was not having the best time doing that. At the time, I was working for a small company you may know called Lego, who makes building blocks. And I realized I really enjoyed that aspect of the world and really in engaging and interacting with people. And I actually moved over to business, specifically hospitality and tourism management. And at the time when I graduated, it was kind of in the depths of the recession, shortly there near 08 and 09. And I was able to graduate with a job and get out in the industry. I worked within the retail and hospitality industry for about 2 years after school. And I eventually found my way to a startup who was run by the head of or former head of US CERT, which is the United States Computer Emergency Readiness Team. It's a global, or a United States Department agency that focuses on protecting US interests here and abroad. And I ended up getting a crash course in cybersecurity, and I realized it was a field that combined both my nerd knowledge, so my love of computers and equations and analytical thinking that I gained from aerospace engineering, and also matched up against my business experience and expertise, trying to find issues and opportunities for efficiencies and fixing problems and reducing redundancies and all those good colloquialisms that we learned at Pamplin. And that ends up being a perfect matchup between the two. And since then, I've worked across a number of federal agencies and state and local groups in the private sector, from healthcare to financial out to Silicon Valley and everywhere in between. And much like Wade, I've kind of bounced around between different roles and jobs that exist in the industry. And there are a lot of jobs and roles that exist in the industry, and we'll talk about some of those tonight.
Thank you all for sharing that with us. If there's nothing else to add to it, I'll move on to the next question, which is, what career pathways are there into the field of cybersecurity? Great segue for me there, Alex. Just threw me a ball up to just hit it up to the next bat. But and also, so career pathways and the job outlook in terms of the DC area and Virginia, broadly speaking. Michael, you look like you wanted to say something.
I'll
go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Okay. Yeah, the career pathways, as we've seen from the panel here, are very varied. There's a lot of ways to get into this. I think most of us have started in some other kind of adjacent field of IT, whether it's systems management or software development. And then you realize that security is really embedded into all of that. It's not a bolt-on thing where there's other areas of IT and then there's security. Security is throughout, and it's part of all the other areas. So you can quickly find yourself getting involved in it. And if you like it, and if it's something you want to pursue, I think that's a great way to get into it. It's just to, start in any kind of IT area, and you'll find that security in one form or another is going to be part of your world.
To follow up on that, Chris, I think it's not just finding what you like, but if you have a side passion or an interest, if you like law or engineering or architecture, any type of business is going to touch cybersecurity. So it's not just sitting in a server farm out in Ashburn or somewhere else in the Midwest. You can kind of marry two of your passions or two of your career interests and still find a path through what is cybersecurity. Because if you have data or any IT resources, somewhere in that company, there's going to be a person or a department or a team of people that manage the resources to keep them secure.
Fantastic. Wade or Alex, would you like to chime in on that?
Certainly. I end up talking to a lot of students about various career pathways in cybersecurity. And if you haven't checked it out, there's a great document out there, the NICE, N-I-C-E framework, and it describes, I can't remember how many, but 30 to 40 cybersecurity work roles of all different types and flavors. And it also has the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are associated with those work roles. So I would say check that out and just read it, see what interests you, and follow that. Now, stepping aside from that, I kind of look at it in two dimensions. So on the one hand, I generally divide up the world of security jobs into enterprise, government, and vendor. In other words, you can work for an enterprise, meaning just any company out there that needs to defend their system. So your job is as a defender protecting the information assets of that enterprise. Government is similar. You can work for a government agency, but there's all kinds of different jobs in government. You can be a defender, you can be on the offensive side of security. There's lots of different roles, but government has very wide variety of positions, and it's a great place to start a career if you can get an entry position, and then it just opens the world up to you for what to do after that. And then the third category I mentioned there was vendors. So there's all kinds of service providers, product-oriented companies that security is what they sell, right? Whether, again, it's product or service. And I've worked on that side of the fence quite a bit in my career, and I enjoy it. You get to help those other categories, enterprise and government customers, improve their posture and do what they need to do to protect their assets. So, those are different kinds of roles. I find that a lot of people just think about enterprise security or just government, but think of it much broader than that. And then we'll get into it later, I'm sure, but there's lots of different types of roles that you can have at each of those three sort of categories of employers.
Yeah, Wade brings up a great point. I've spent a large portion of my career in that last bucket, those vendors, and more aptly, as you may know them, as consultants. And what's great about that industry and that specific sector of this job market is that you have the opportunity to go out and see a lot of different problems and help solve a lot of solutions. What's great in my experience is I've been able to be in a lot of different roles and see a lot of different operations, those enterprises and those governments, see how they do things and understand and help them get better, but often taking those same principles and applying them somewhere else to someone who's not quite at that stage.
Yeah.
Working in-house is also great. You have the opportunity to fix problems and grow with a business. And as they expand operations, maybe staying here in the country or internationally, there's lots of new opportunities, new technologies and things to get better at. And sometimes you don't have the answers and you employ some of those consultants to come in and help you get better, or you get new technology that comes in. So they all play a part and a role in it. Kind of like Wade said too, the NICE framework is a really great way to find out about what jobs might exist, and more importantly, what knowledge you might need to learn to be able to go after some of those jobs. That framework has tried to kind of create a homogenized way of looking at the industry and some of the roles that we take. To take it up even at a further level, the three main ones that I kind of think of when I look at the industry and some of the roles exist are the operational roles. So those are things where we traditionally think of as IT roles, but they're supporting cybersecurity practices. So if you're maybe out patching servers or installing new operating systems, or even answering phone calls at a help desk to reset passwords, that's part of cybersecurity. The second is really what you probably think of when you think of cybersecurity, and it's those technical roles. So looking at network forensics or network monitoring, or ethically hacking into a company, something we call penetration testing. Those are a deep and a depth of knowledge that you really have to gain from being in the industry for a little while. But you may have experienced some of those things. You may be studying some of them online right now. But the third is really around the management of cybersecurity. And that can include things like risk management, so reducing the risk of cybersecurity issues, things like business continuity planning. So what do we do when things go wrong? Or how do we respond when something goes wrong with incident response? And other times it can be just giving security awareness presentations, or even managing, the inventory of assets and disposing of them. All of these things are opportunities that feed into reducing the risk that companies and governments and contractors and everyone else in between experience as a result of cybersecurity.
That's so fantastic. But wait a second, I was under the impression that the only people that could get into this field are people who wore hoodies in a dark corner of the internet that were looking at the matrix. It sounds like that's wrong. So what are the options that might be available, or what is it that you as industry leaders and esteemed panelists look for in terms of people? What might the audience here might be able to glean from this conversation if they want to get started in this?
Well, if you don't want to be a hacker in a hoodie, I recommend buying some lamps, maybe some artwork, a nice vest or something warm to wear. That's a good way to avoid that, just generally not live in a cave. One of the best places I think to start is to have a general curiosity about what's going on. Cybersecurity is so fascinating and it impacts us in so many ways today, and a lot of people don't know about that. Oftentimes just reading about it can give you an idea of some of the things that are happening. And what we generally do in the industry is try to look at how are things going wrong and how can we prevent those things from going wrong. And sometimes that can just take a study of the news to say, what are people doing? How are things failing? Where are people falling short? Where are organizations falling short? Or where are we as a country falling short? And how do we improve those processes? And is it a matter of education? And what do I need to learn then to be able to educate other people about not falling prey to hackers? Or is it about developing new technologies and how can we do that better? So starting to ask some of those questions and really getting a backbone of some of the motivating factors and drivers can really set you apart and set you down a path towards this career.
Great, thank you. Who else would like to chime in on that?
I'll chime in on that one. As I mentioned when I gave my background, I had a technical start in security. I went from network and system management to network security management. But after 2 or 3 years of that, the business and analytical aspects of cybersecurity started to fascinate me. So I read a paper actually that had a profound effect on the way I thought about security. Before in the early days, I thought my job is just lock down systems and prevent bad things from happening, right? That's what I thought of security. But this paper was titled, "How Much is Enough?" And I can't remember the subtitle, but it was someone's dissertation. And they were basically asking the question, how do we know how much to invest in security to the point when it's, quote, enough, right? And that's a business question. And ultimately, it's a risk question. And that got me fascinated for the last 15 years on this notion of how do we answer that question? What kind of data do we need to answer the question? How do we know what kind of risk exposure, cyber risk exposure in particular, we have now? How do we quantify that? How do we make decisions based on that so that we can deploy limited resources, right? Nobody has unlimited resources to provide as much security as you can possibly get. So it's a balance, and security is ultimately risk management, which does put it squarely, I don't want to say non-technical, because there are technical aspects of that. But a winning security program will not be the program that can just configure firewalls and patch all their systems. There's a whole lot more to it than that. And I've studied thousands and thousands and thousands of breaches over my career, and very, very few of them have only a technical root cause. It is almost always a operational process, people, and organizational root cause.
That's so great, and I hate to intervene here with my own experience, but I spent several years walking up to people, talking to them, inserting a USB into the back of their monitor while they're chatting away, walking with a clipboard, trying to get past access controls. So to that point exactly, that there's a people problem here, and if you know those people problems, there's certainly non-technical aspects of this as well, but there's a critical role of business, but also government. So with that said, Chris, I'm gonna ask you a question on the spot here. What do regional governments do to attract cyber companies that you had mentioned previously, and what do local governments do to grow and attract and retain young talent?
Well, the first one, I'd say it's kind of a knife fight out there between the local governments, and we're all trying to grow our economies, and it's kind of a fun co-opetition we have with our neighbors. We up here in Loudon County, we've got certainly the data center capital of the world, so we're trying to kind of fill out that infrastructure and bring in software companies who support the cloud computing that's exploding right now. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Repeat. What was the second part of your question, Joe?
I'm sorry, I threw a lot at you, but the second part of that is, what do companies do, and as well as local governments, to grow, attract, and retain young talent?
Well, that's an important question, because a trained workforce is really what companies are looking for. If they were going to move, let's say, from California to the East Coast, to relocate their company, or even open up a federal sales office in the Northern Virginia area, they're going to want to make sure that they're able to hire good people. And that includes, certainly a lot of young people. They want folks with the young ideas, young talent coming out of school, coming out of trade programs, et cetera. So it's an important part of what we advertise at Loudon County is that we do have a trained, ready workforce. Up here, there's a lot of folks who know the IT business. But the people, process, technology, it goes in that order. It starts with people, and it starts with good people who have a passion for this industry and who can communicate that to their clients, their coworkers, et cetera. So the technology, it can only be implemented by good people. So
great, that's awesome. Michael, would you like to dive in on this?
Yeah, I'll jump in and kind of patch, to use a bad pun, between Wade and Chris here on something that they both said, in that there are clearly the technical roles that we've discussed on, of which I can speak nothing about. So please don't direct any questions to me unless you'd like to hear something made up on the spot. But when we're looking to hire and we're looking to partner with different firms for bigger projects, it comes down to people. Chris, as you said first. It's the ability to communicate clearly, understand a client or an industry problem, and convey it in a way that is approachable and actionable, not just go hitting a keyboard and fixing ones and zeros and make everything okay. Because the technology side, the IT support, is really secondary to the personnel who operate those systems. And so you do have a management and a person-to-person interaction that you kind of have to balance as well.
Oh, that's y'all keep throwing them up here. I was just about to ask. So what are these companies looking for, or government, in terms of skills, qualifications, or personal attributes that you should have in order to be successful in finding a job and being successful in your career?
I think there's a number of ways to start and get into the industry and ultimately, make your resume stand out at the top of the pile. The first is some sort of experience. So obviously the cybersecurity workforce today has a huge deficit. And by 2021, it's projected to be, I think it's 3.5 million worker shortage. So there's a call for talent and a want for talent, but there's not a lot of people who have experienced or worked in the cybersecurity industry. So even having an opportunity to go out and work for a summer as an internship, maybe at a consulting firm, and understanding what are some different types of audits if you're maybe not a specific technical person, or having worked in an IT shop, maybe configuring some firewalls, or even racking and stacking servers, can all be useful information that plays into the larger picture of cybersecurity. The key, kind of like we talked about, is understanding where those jobs do exist and ultimately tailoring your resume to speak to those specific opportunities. As someone who might be reviewing those resumes or creating job postings, we're looking for those specific experiences to match up to ultimately what we want you to be able to do for us and the opportunities that we want you to bring. Of course, a huge part of this is ultimately going to be really understanding people and the business. One of the big things within the world of IT is that we focus on creating things and taking those business processes and digitizing them and making them available for use for those companies. But in the world of security, we have to take those same processes and secure them. And of course, the best security is something that doesn't have anybody using it. Well, that's just not possible. And so it's going to be that balance of really showing also your business acumen and saying, I understand what the business is trying to do with this, and I'm going to make sure that I can secure it, but still make it usable. And so being able to speak that language and bridge that gap is a huge part of the industry as well.
That's great. And before other people jump in, I just want to illustrate this point. One of the themes that I seem to be consistently hearing is this knowledge of business and knowledge of cybersecurity. And it sounds like there's this critical matchup of understanding both of those roles and how they integrate with one another. Is that pretty accurate?
That's very accurate. I think that is a huge piece of the puzzle to being successful. Cybersecurity isn't some niche part of IT anymore. It's not something that gets bolted on or stands alone, but it's very much coupled into IT. But unlike on IT, which might have some specific requirements if they're trying to stand something up or maybe to keep the network up and running all the time, cybersecurity has to turn around and convey that risk back to the business and ultimately aim to reduce that risk and reduce it in a way that's meaningful and lets the business continue to grow and innovate and do what it does best. And so it's very important to be able to speak kind of both of those languages and communicate it effectively.
Great, thank you so much. Back to the main question, Michael?
Yeah, I was going to kind of take off Alex there and communicating it back to the company. And from the CFO's role, that translates to dollars and cents. What is the exposure to a company? If it was breached, what's an investment in a new system? What's the cost of switching against the legacy system? All of these are assessed in real time. In parallel streams of chaos that is 2020 and will be 2021, trying to understand how to position, in our client base over this year, we found as the world went remote, they went from things that work, but ignored things that worked securely. And that left a gaping vulnerability in things. And so we've spent a lot of time with our clients educating them on what the difference means. And so when we're talking about, who we look to hire, well, it's being able to identify, as Alex said, how something can be secure, and then how you can make it secure and still make it function for a business. And it's that back and forth to what you said, Joe, that you have to understand what the business does, what the widget they're making, to go back to your freshman econ class when no one knows what a widget is, but we use it for the next 30 years. So you have to know the process behind that widget and where, from a business side, you should be investing in bolstering security and where you might be just okay. And to what Wade was saying about what is that level of okay and risk management. So it's a very broad stroke that you can dive very deep on very quickly, but you kind of do have to be able to bounce around from department to department.
Fantastic. Chris and Wade, would you have anything to add to that?
Wade, go ahead.
I was just going to say I don't have something to add to that. I think they've said what I would say.
Yeah, I mean the more that companies go towards a digital environment, cyber risk is not just a technology risk; it's a business risk, and so it needs to be communicated in those terms up to the C-suite level folks who make the investments in what needs to be done to secure the environment as best you can.
Oh, that's fantastic. I've added a link to the NICE job roles that Wade had spoken about previously down in your chat, down in there. I don't know exactly where it shows up for you, but if you search down there, you should be able to find it. I've been fielded a question, if you'll just give me a minute to read that and field it to the panelists very quickly. What about finding internships with no experience? What would you recommend for students? How can they position themselves for these internships without prior experience coming into those roles?
I'll take that one. I have taken on a class in the BIT cyber program that is called Field Study, which is essentially the junior/senior internship that students are required to have in that program. And so, that's one of the things that we help you with. First of all, especially if you're a student at Virginia Tech, you're not fending for yourself and trying to scare up some role, but we help with that. There are a lot of organizations that post internships that have very large programs around this, where they will bring in interns and you have a summer or whatever it is. And then we've had a lot of students that have signed a contract already this fall because of their summer internship, and they're not graduating till the next year. So that's actually pretty common, and there's a lot of good internship programs is my point there. The pandemic kind of threw a wrench in internships this year because things that were supposed to be on site for a hands-on security internship role all of a sudden could not be done. But there's thankfully a lot of remote work in security. So I helped get a bunch of students internships this summer when their physical ones fell through. But again, I would look out there. Lots of companies post these things, and they have a special place for interns to apply. And then if that you're not finding anything there, whoever your advisor, professor, family members, or acquaintances that work in the field, they might know of roles.
Well, thank you. Anyone else like to add in on that?
Yeah, I'll just add that. Well, I was going to say a lot of local economic development organizations realize the importance of internships and act as that mediator between industry and the folks who are looking for these things. So if you check out their sites or give them a call, you might find some information on it. Also, there's a Commonwealth Cyber Initiative, which is running an internship program. So, the Commonwealth of Virginia really is 100% behind cyber. We're trying to make the state a leader in the country in cyber, and so they have some programs that might be able to help out some young folks.
And for those who maybe are not quite at that point or not able to take advantage of some of those programs that exist at Tech, what's great about the NICE framework is it's essentially bullets that can go on your resume. And so one of the great ways is to maybe find an internship in a tangential role. So maybe within the world of IT or something in risk management or under audit or compliance. Ultimately, the NICE framework can kind of take those same roles and reword them a little bit. Maybe you could say fluffs them up or shines them up a little bit to land on your resume and be a little bit better. And so those same things map back often to job applications, because now employers are leveraging that same framework to post their job roles and things on their websites. So you can start to kind of find matches through that same way. So, even though you might be working again tangential to the industry, like many of us did, you can oftentimes find some bullets in that same framework that can better make your resume fit into some of those roles that might exist.
That's great. So it sounds like you might be able to use the NICE framework and some of these opportunities to game, if you will, for lack of a better terminology, the applicant tracking systems that utilize terminology. But what about this student who's potentially coming in as a junior, who's got a associate's in business administration and has not yet taken any technical courses? Any thoughts or ideas on that?
Sorry, is this still in respect to internships or just cyber career paths in general?
I apologize, I didn't make that clear. Just more broadly speaking, some of our audience are coming in from potentially community colleges, and they have a bachelor's in business an associate's in business administration. So how could they transition themselves into this more cybersecurity, round themselves out?
Yeah. So I think those business classes, again, will be useful, especially you can position them as strengths, depending on what kind of security career you're looking for, kind of going back to those NICE work roles or the operational, analytical, technical, managerial, wherever you fall in that. Padding out your background with appropriate level of supplemental courses. So the standard security technology type courses where you learn the basics of cybersecurity, where you might get some experience configuring systems, any of those. And I know at least in Virginia Tech, there are courses in computer science, there's courses in the business school, there are courses elsewhere as well. You might take some policy courses. There's courses in analysis and data analysis. I mean, there's a huge aspect of data analysis in cybersecurity. So, I would think, what kind of role do you want, and really start planning out those courses, and beyond courses, maybe there's things you can do at home. I always encourage students to play around with technologies and other tools that they're interested in. There's tons of kind of free for personal use type security tools where you can put those on the resume and say, hey, look, I ran Splunk on my home network and this is what I did. And you can tell a story during an interview, and they might say, oh, that sounds, we use Splunk to monitor our network traffic. So you'll fit right in. So anytime you can pick up those kinds of things, I think it's great.
Yeah, Wade brings up a good point that a lot of cybersecurity resumes are similar to IT, where IT might come in and say, what framework or what languages do you know, right? What products do you have experiences with? In cybersecurity, we do something similar, where we look at what tools you've used before, or maybe what frameworks you've used. So if you've been at home and you've tinkered with Linux or other tools like IDSs and IPSs or firewalls, or done something similar, even just putting those on your resume can sometimes get it to the top of the stack. The second part I mentioned was around frameworks. There's a number of industry frameworks that we generally leverage to impart cybersecurity rules and policies, and ultimately assess our risk for many different industries. Some of the big ones include NIST 853 out of the federal government, or you may hear of the ISO framework that's used internationally as well. And sometimes even just sitting down and reading those documents, which are freely available on the internet, can basically act like a dictionary and encyclopedia for how to secure an IT system. If you know what those documents are and the parts that they are necessary cover and are necessary to make a system secure, that can ultimately give you a baseline for how to make that happen. You may not know exactly how to impact or make that work, and you may not know how to audit that specifically, but to have that underlying foundation is a huge part. Along those same lines, understanding some of the compliance frameworks that drive specific companies. So if you look at big banks, they're usually governed by something called the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards, or PCI DSS. If you put that on your resume, you're going right to the top of the stack, because not many college kids are going to know what that is. Or if you go into the utility sector, there's something called NERC. or that same one with NIST in the government is called FISMA. So if you can read some of those documents and understand what they mean and how they're supposed to be rolled out and managed and maintained, that can give you a huge advantage, in addition to giving you a good idea of what the industry is about day to day.
Fantastic, thank you. I have a very quick question. I've heard there's a little bit of money to be made from being in a cybersecurity role. Michael, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, that's a bit of a softball question. So yes, it is a well-compensated industry as a whole, but it is, as unbiased as I think the five of us or the four of us can say, duly justified with the balancing act between expertise that's brought to it. It is not a one-trick pony where you come in for one item or one issue. Because of the balance between business side and the technical side, you really do find yourself doing 2, 3, and 8 jobs at once to kind of bring all the spinning plates together. From a consulting side, to go back to Wade's, I don't know if you call them buckets or your 3 classes at the enterprise and government and the vendor consulting, you kind of find varying pay scales that you can go in there. And it's harder to find the more lucrative jobs because, well, they're more lucrative for a reason. But wherever you start, it is a quick slide into pretty good compensation, and more so than just compensation, it's a rewarding field of work that you get to touch on and keep industries, families, businesses, and nations secure, depending where you find yourself in the silo. I dodged that well enough for you.
Thank you so much. I'm almost running out of time before I ask questions to the audience, but I would like to take a moment to plug in some of the programs we have here at Virginia Tech. I'm going to link in the chat the BIT cyber program that they have. Svetlana, feel free to correct me on any of this, same with Wade, and also the Pathways program for the integrated security destination area. And so if you're interested in these programs, for the ISDA one, please feel free to abuse my email inbox. Anyone who's here in the audience, I'm jjsimpson@vt.edu. And for Svetlana, I don't know if you have a point of contact for the BIT cyber program. I'm happy to link. You're already all over it. Thank you so much. So feel free to reach out to us if you're interested in those programs that I've linked into the chat. But with that said, I would like to open the audience, open up questions to the audience for the rest of our time here, and see if there's any questions. If you don't feel comfortable answering or asking those questions with your microphone off, I don't know if that's enabled or not based on Zoom. I didn't check the authorizations, if you will, but feel free to type it in chat. It is enabled. I've been told it is enabled. And feel free to ask your questions in chat if you don't feel comfortable turning on your audio to ask them.
While we're waiting for those to come in, I'm going to circle back to the question that Alex and Wade touched on about learning experience. I can tell you, again, remembering I came from not a technical background, I've learned more about cybersecurity watching Alex break our network and rebuild it, trying to fix something and make it more securely, and explain to me why it now makes more securely and what the difference is. And it all just comes, from hands-on experience of building it, breaking it apart, and rebuilding it a different way, whether it's in a virtual environment or in a follow along, actual hands-on Raspberry Pi, making your own mini network. It's just, the old adage, if you got to break it to understand it, it couldn't be more true.
Thank you. We've got a question from the audience, and the question is, are there women in cybersecurity? And I would open that even more. How important is diversity in terms of cybersecurity as well?
Yes, there are women in cybersecurity. Admittedly, it's become a recognized issue over the last several years, and there've been a few public instances where there's been a lot more momentum to try to bridge that gap. I mean, traditionally, There are a lot of white males in cybersecurity. But again, it's a recognized issue. Lots of women entering the field, as well as other diverse workers, and I see writing on it all the time. I guarantee if you Google women in cybersecurity or other things like that, you'll find a ton of stuff. You'll find communities of people that are working at various ways to solve that issue. And just a kind of a example, I have a series of interviews in my courses with industry experts and leaders, and half of them are women. And I did that on purpose because hey, there's a whole lot of smart women in cybersecurity that I want students to hear from. But also, I think it's important to show that they're out there. And I've had a lot of students say, thanks, I appreciate that. I hear from a lot of women now. I'm aware that it's not just a male field. And so thank you. And so, yeah, I think there might be that misconception. There has historically been some problems, but there's lots of momentum to rectify that.
Great. I'm getting flooded with questions here. So I apologize to the audience if I can't get to all of your questions, or our panelists cannot.
We get paid by the question, right, Joe? Is that how it is? Like we were getting paid by the question. I thought what we negotiated, but
not now.
Keep them coming.
I didn't think this many. I'm just kidding. So one of the questions is about certifications. Are there any certifications that can help get a job?
There are a lot of certifications, and they cross all gamuts of cybersecurity. There are specific technical ones that deal with specific products. You can look at the whole suite from AWS, for example. But there's starting to be more security certifications that are popping up. One of the entry-level ones is called Security Plus, and it basically just shows that you have an entry-level knowledge of security. Odds are, if you study this at Tech, you're going to learn most of the items that are in that. Later on, there's additional ones that move into specific realms, like your CEH for your Certified Ethical Hacker. If you move into auditing and compliance, there's one called the Certified Information Security Auditor, or CISA. And one of the big ones that's generally recognized as kind of the top tier certification is the CISSP, Certified Information Systems Security Practitioner. Wade, there you go, there's a book right there. Can't remember what it stands for, but you also have to have 5 years of experience in order to officially get that. So kind of similar to the PE, if you're familiar with the engineering world. But there are some entry-level ones that exist, and there's other ones you can get, and they could definitely boost your resume and show a general knowledge. Some employers rely on that as a baseline standard. Others still want to see actual working experience. So it can vary and your results may vary.
Great, thank you so much. I have a question. Again, if you have a question that's not answered in this chat, send it to jjsimpson@vt.edu. I will make sure that it's answered sooner or later. So I apologize if we don't get to it here. A great question that I saw is, do you need a security clearance at entry level?
You do not?
No.
In certain government roles, you do. In most private sector roles, you do not.
Okay, short and to the point. I like it. Someone asked
However, keep your activities clean, because you will eventually try and find yourself in a role where you'll need a clearance. And if you haven't, just keep it clean and keep a log of everywhere you've lived, every phone number, every roommate, because it'll just save you about a week of time trying to track it all down.
Yeah, to speak to that, I've held 3 clearances. Each one, they require each address, someone who knew you at that address. It's a pain. Anyways.
And you can't repeat people, and so you have to play this game of chess of who can vouch for you at which address at which time, and
like Matrix
start your log now.
Fantastic. Someone asked about payment card industry. How does a student get experience within the payment card industry, for example?
Experience, obviously that's going to be, landing a job and working for a company who manages that. But if you want to learn more about what that means and ultimately what those standards are and how they work to protect credit card processing and storage of credit card information, literally just go to Google and type in PCI DSS and it'll pop up with a big spreadsheet. And basically those are the requirements for companies who handle, store, and process credit cards. And so you can almost view it as a guide, because when the auditors come through, they use that same list to assess whether that company is meeting those standards. But before that all happened, that company had to sit down and make sure that they created policies and implemented technical controls and technology and people and everything else to meet those standards. And so there's kind of two sides of the house from that auditing side. And so just being familiar with the document and being familiar with it enough that you're willing to put it on your resume and say, yes, I can speak to that and I know about it, it can be a huge advantage for you.
Hey, I see a question about social life, and I'll take that one. I think there's maybe two different ways I could interpret that question. One is, can I still have a social life and work in security? The answer is yes. It is a job that tends to take what you allow it to have. It's depending on what kind of security role that you have. When I worked in IR, it's constantly interrupted weekends and late nights if something happens, because it always happens at 5 o'clock on a Friday. So yes, it can interrupt your social life, but I think lots of different jobs can. And for many it's kind of a hobby as well. Like I spend a lot of time doing various things that are related to security, just because I enjoy it. But yes, you can still have a social life. The other way I could interpret that question is about the security community itself. And is there a tight social network there? And again, I would say, yes, absolutely. The security community, there's tons of conferences in a normal non-pandemic year. We still have tons of conferences, but they're all virtual. But it's a tight community, and you can absolutely find a tribe to fit in with. They'll welcome you in. They'll teach you the trade. You can get to know them, build a social network. And I have found that it's very easy to get to know people and do that. And that benefits your career as well.
Great. There are two questions, Wade. If you would take over for just, I've got a wasp, like I've got to take care of. It's like attacking me right now.
The fire isn't keeping it away? No. Let's see. I'm looking
That's a way to toss a hot mic there.
Yeah, I'm looking for what questions. We answered the software engineering one. Is there a downside to getting an associate's degree from in IT from Nova before transferring? No, I don't think there's a downside to that at all. Now, I don't work in admissions and those other aspects, but from a are you prepared for the workforce perspective, absolutely not. That's what I plan to tell my kids to do, but for what that's worth. I'm in the Nova area, and I think it's a good pathway, and I don't see that you lose any ground at all on that path.
No, and from the industry side, we wouldn't look down on that as being something that was lesser by any means. Ultimately, the goal in cybersecurity is to have the knowledge of the industry and to be prepared to come out. And so whatever path that took you through, even if you spent 3.5 years in aerospace engineering and your parents said, just finish that last semester, and you said, no, Dad, I'm transferring anyways, that's okay. That's part of the experience in finding
totally out. Hypothetical.
Totally hypothetical. It's happened to nobody that I've ever known. To have some unique pathway that goes through, as long as it prepares you in terms of experience, you are by no means lesser or less prepared to enter this industry.
It might be a good chance to interject that some of the best technologists I've ever worked with came out of the U.S. military. So that's another option. If you're looking to get some hands-on experience, they'll give it to you. And these are great people who are then come out of the military, if they want to, prepared to go right into the job market.
Great. I'm back from my cyber wasp attack. Did we get around to the associate's degree in IT from Nova?
We got that one.
Okay, good deal.
I see another question about software engineering. To be honest, if you asked me about those roles, I would not at all equate software engineering with cybersecurity. I think there is some overlap if you did a little Venn diagram. But in general, someone who's in security is not a software developer. You can specialize in the security aspects of software development. That is very needed. One of the big problems we have in security is insecure, buggy software that has to be maintained for its life, and it causes vulnerabilities, lots of which you see exploited in major breaches. But the skill sets are different. Having said that, I would say that the coding and development worlds and security are starting to move together, especially in a cloud environment where a lot of your security configuration is done programmatically through code and software interfaces. It's not like I used to do as a firewall administrator where there's a box and I plug in a cable and type on a console to administer that. It's done through an API and it's code. And so these skills intermingle very well, but I still consider them different fields. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they've stayed separate in that doing software engineering does not necessarily always equate to cybersecurity. However, we've started to see a little bit of a change in terms of how developers work over the years. And while I don't necessarily work in this space, we've gone from developers to developers who are expected to not only develop, but also to focus on the operations of that product afterwards. And we created DevOps. And so now, in an effort to slam more words in there, there's starting to be an expectation that you're no longer baking on security after the fact. They want it to be part of that same cycle with development and operations. And so they stuck security right in the middle. And so now we're starting to see DevSecOps people coming out in the world, and we're seeing it on resumes as well. So if it is something you do want to continue to pursue and to be in that space, having an understanding of security and putting on your resume as DevSecOps could give you a leg up. But I don't think it always translates back to security specifically, but for someone who's looking for secure coding practices and they know that you can do it, that may be an advantage in that industry.
Great, thank you. We're almost out of time. I want to thank each of you as panelists for coming here and spending your late night on 7 p.m. and later out here with our guests and our audience here. Thank you for our audience who have tuned in here. If you have questions, again, please reach out to me. I don't know about our panelists with regard to questions, but I will try to make sure that your questions are answered. And I hope you've really enjoyed this experience. Y'all have a good evening, and I'll stick around for just a minute or two, and I'll try to get answers coordinated for you.